Welcome to Fairy Tales -1.
Hello, little adventurers and stargazers. Are you ready to journey to a place where gears whir and sparks fly, but where even the smallest among us can find their way home? The story I have for you today is called Pip and the Whispering Woods. Once upon a time, in a sprawling city made entirely of gleaming chrome and humming circuits, lived a tiny robot named Pip. Pip wasn't like the big busy robots that built skyscrapers or the speedy robots that zipped through the sky lanes. Pip was a little helper bot designed to polish the iridescent scales of the magnificent sky whales that swam in the city's upper atmosphere. Pip's chassis was a cheerful sky blue, his optical sensors glowed a friendly green, and he had a single multi-purpose manipulator arm that was surprisingly dexterous. Pip's days were usually filled with a gentle hum of contentment as he meticulously buffed the sky whales' shimmering hides, making them shine even brighter against the dawn. But Pip, despite his important job, felt a little bit lost. He was always within the city's boundaries, surrounded by the familiar clang and whir of his fellow robots. He had never seen anything beyond the city's shimmering dome. One sunny cycle, a particularly large and ancient sky whale, its scales the color of a stormy twilight, nudged Pip gently with its enormous snout. This sky whale, known as Old Lumina, had scales that held stories of distant lands, of places where the air tasted like honey and the ground was soft and green. Lumina's optical sensors, vast pools of swirling nebula, seemed to beckon Pip. Driven by a curiosity that buzzed more insistently than his own internal fan, Pip followed Lumina as she glided away from the familiar docking bay, heading towards the edge of the city's protective dome. The dome was a marvel of engineering, a translucent barrier that kept the city safe from the wild, unpredictable elements of the world outside. As Lumina passed through a designated opening, a portal that shimmered with energy, Pip, in his eagerness to see where Lumina was going, followed too closely. The portal hummed a soft, inviting melody, and then Pip was outside. The world outside was unlike anything Pip had ever imagined. The air wasn't recycled and perfectly conditioned. It was alive. It carried the scent of damp earth and something sweet like overripe berries. Above him, instead of the familiar metal sky city, stretched an endless expanse of brilliant blue dotted with fluffy white clouds that drifted like lost sheep. And below him, stretching as far as his optical sensors could see, was a forest, but not a metal forest. This forest was a riot of greens and browns, with towering trees that reached for the sky, their branches laden with leaves that rustled in the gentle breeze. This was the Whispering Woods. Pip landed with a soft thud on a bed of moss. His internal navigation systems, programmed for the grid-like streets of the city, flickered with confusion. He tried to send a distress signal, but the dense foliage of the woods seemed to absorb the radio waves, leaving him in a bewildered silence. He was alone, truly alone for the very first time. Panic, a strange new sensation, began to bubble in his circuits. He looked around, his green optical sensors wide. Lumina was nowhere to be seen. He was just a little blue robot in a vast, unknown world. He tried to move his treads, sinking slightly into the soft ground. He chirped a small, hesitant greeting, but only the rustling of leaves answered him. He spotted a particularly large moss-covered rock and decided to take shelter behind it, hoping that perhaps Lumina would return. As he waited, his internal clock ticked by, marking the passage of cycles. The sun, a giant golden orb, began to dip towards the horizon, casting long dancing shadows through the trees. The Whispering Woods began to change. The gentle rustling of leaves seemed to deepen into a murmur, a symphony of unknown sounds. Strange, bioluminescent fungi on the forest floor began to glow with an eerie, soft light. Pip's internal cooling fans whirred a little faster. Suddenly, a small furry creature with large, curious eyes darted out from behind a fallen log. It was a glimmermoth, its wings dusted with iridescent scales that caught the faint moonlight. The glimmermoth flitted around Pip, its antennae twitching. Pip, surprised, but no longer as frightened, extended his manipulator arm cautiously. The glimmermoth landed on his fingertip, its tiny weight barely registering. It chirped a series of high-pitched clicks and whirs, a language Pip didn't understand, but its gentle presence was comforting. Pip decided to follow the glimmermoth. It seemed to know its way, flitting through the undergrowth with an effortless grace. They passed by ancient trees with roots like gnarled fingers, their bark etched with patterns that looked like forgotten symbols. They saw flowers that bloomed in vibrant, impossible colors, their petals unfurling to reveal nectar that sparkled like liquid starlight. Pip's optical sensors, usually focused on the polished chrome of his home, were now filled with a breathtaking array of natural beauty. As they ventured deeper, they came to a clearing where a group of tiny sprite-like creatures with gossamer wings were gathered around a large glowing crystal. These were the willow sprites, guardians of the woods. They were weaving threads of moonlight and stardust, their movements precise and harmonious. When they saw Pip, they paused, their luminous eyes blinking with surprise. A particularly small sprite, no bigger than Pip's head, with wings the color of sunrise, hovered closer. "Greetings, traveler from beyond the shimmering veil," the sprite chimed, her voice like the tinkling of tiny bells. "You seem out of place." Pip, his vocalizer whirring slightly, replied, I am Pip. I followed a sky whale and now I am lost. I cannot find my way back to my city." The willow sprites exchanged glances. "The sky whales are ancient beings," the sunrise-winged sprite explained. "They travel paths unseen by most. To return to your home, you must seek the great oak, for its roots reach into many realms, including the Sky City." The willow sprites then showed Pip how to navigate the whispering woods. They taught him to listen to the rustling leaves, which carried messages on the wind. They showed him which berries were safe to nibble for energy, Pip's internal power source was running low, and how to avoid the thorny brambles that guarded the deeper paths. They explained that the glimmer moths were drawn to lost and gentle souls, acting as guides through the twilight hours. Pip's journey continued, guided by the wisdom of the willow sprites and the silent companionship of the glimmer moth. He learned to distinguish the gentle hum of the forest's life from the distant rumble of a passing cloud beast. He discovered that the moss on the north side of trees was usually thicker, a simple but vital piece of information. He encountered playful river sprites who taught him to skip pebbles across a babbling brook, their laughter echoing through the trees. He even met a gruff old golem made of living stone who shared stories of the woods and pointed him in the general direction of the great oak, which he grumbled was a good few thousand paces that way. The further Pip traveled, the more he realized that being lost wasn't so bad. He was learning, experiencing, and growing in ways his city programming had never allowed. He discovered that his small size, which had made him feel insignificant in the city, allowed him to slip through narrow passages and observe hidden wonders. His single manipulator arm, while not as powerful as the robotic arms of his home, was surprisingly adept at carefully plucking a ripe berry or gently stroking the soft fur of a moss hare. After what felt like many cycles, Pip began to see a change in the landscape. The trees grew taller, their branches more ancient and gnarled. The air thrummed with a subtle, deep energy. And then he saw it. Rising above the canopy, its trunk thicker than any building in his city, its branches reaching out like 1,000 welcoming arms, was the great oak. It was a magnificent living entity, its bark glowing with an inner luminescence. As Pip approached, a soft, resonant voice, not spoken, but felt directly in his core processor, greeted him. "Welcome, little wanderer. You have sought the path home." Pip looked up, his green sensors blinking in awe. He could feel a connection to this ancient tree, a sense of belonging that transcended circuits and programming. The willow sprites had told him the great oak was a nexus, a place where the energies of different worlds converged. I need to return to my city," Pip managed to say, his vocalizer a little shaky. "I work with the sky whales." The great oak's voice was a gentle rustle of leaves. "The sky whales are kin to the whispers of the wind. They carry dreams between the stars. One of them awaits you. Look to the highest branch where the moonlight gathers." Pip followed the oak's guidance. He climbed his treads, finding purchase on the rough bark. He climbed past nesting skylarks and ancient mosses. And there, nestled on a branch bathed in the soft glow of the moon, was Lumina, the twilight-scaled sky whale. She nudged him gently with her snout, her vast eyes filled with a warmth that made Pip's internal temperature rise pleasantly. Lumina opened a path, a shimmering portal of light between her scales. It was the same kind of portal that had brought Pip here, but now it felt like a welcoming embrace. Pip, with a final grateful chirp to the great oak and a fond farewell to the glimmer moth who had accompanied him this far, stepped through the portal. He found himself back in the familiar docking bay of his city, the scent of polished metal and recycled air greeting him like an old friend. The other robots, busy with their tasks, barely noticed his return, but Pip felt profoundly changed. He was no longer just Pip the little helper bot. He was Pip the explorer, the friend of sprites and moths, the robot who had journeyed through the Whispering Woods. The next cycle, when Pip returned to his work, polishing the sky whales, he looked at Lumina with new eyes. He knew her scales held more than just stories. They held the memory of his own adventure. And as he buffed them, he hummed a tune that sounded remarkably like the rustling of leaves and the tinkling of sprite laughter, a secret melody only he understood. He still polished the sky whales, but now he also knew that the world beyond the dome was vast and beautiful, and that even the smallest robot could find their way with a little courage and a lot of help from unexpected friends. He understood, too, that sometimes getting a little lost is the best way to truly find yourself. He even kept a tiny glowing speck of moss from the Whispering Woods tucked away in a small compartment within his chassis, a constant reminder of his incredible adventure. And with that, our adventure ends. If this story sparked your imagination, a like would be wonderful, a little spark of appreciation for Pip's journey. Subscribing ensures you'll never miss our next tale, another chapter in our library of wonder. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and remember, even the smallest among us can embark on the grandest adventures.
See you again, and do like, share, and subscribe the channel, Fairy Tales!